not participate. But if you don't, I don't think if you don't talk, you're not going to be on the recording. So you're good. So welcome to our special Hanukkah edition of AJL Presents, featuring the new book, The Matza Ball by Meltzer. I'm Rachel Kamen, Director of Lifelong Learning at North Suburban Synagogue Bethel in Highland Park, Illinois. And we have an awesome program lined up today that will include a book discussion, a conversation with the author, Meltzer, and a rundown of more new romance novels with Jewish content. And we also hope that you will share your own recommended reads that end HEA, which, if you're not familiar with the jargon, stands for Happily Ever After. So if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, you can put your name and where you're from. But I am going to proceed with introducing my esteemed AJL colleagues and enthusiastic romance readers who helped to plan this program and will be participating in our discussion. Rebecca Levitan is a public librarian at the Pikesville branch of the Baltimore County Public Library. She's the immediate past chair of the Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee and is now the co-editor for Children's and Young Adult Reviews for the AJL News and Reviews publication. She collects romance novels like trading cards and will eventually get to reading them all. During the day, Dina Herbert is a National Archives liaison to social networks and archival context and is the immediate past president of the Association of Jewish Libraries. At night, she wrangles 2 small children in Alexandria, Virginia, and stays up way too late reading romance novels. And you have to see her awesome t-shirt. Everyone can see Dina's t-shirt, it's very appropriate. And Aviva Rosenberg is the Youth Services Librarian at the Ridgefield Free Public Library in Bergen County, New Jersey. She is a member of the Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee and writes book reviews for AJL News and Reviews. Sports and historical romance novels are her favorites, as long as they're well researched. She's a librarian after all. So now to introduce our featured book today. As author Meltzer describes it herself, and I think this is just a great description, so I figured I would just read her description. The Matza Ball is an own voices Hanukkah rom-com about a chronically ill, nice Jewish girl and daughter of a rabbi who has a secret career as a best-selling Christmas romance novelist. When she's forced by her diversity-conscious publisher to write her first Hanukkah romance, she seeks inspiration at the Matza Ball, a high-end Jewish music celebration on the last night of Hanukkah. There's just one problem. Tickets are sold out, and the only way to get one is direct from the Matza Ball's creator, Jacob Greenberg, the swoon-worthy dreamboat who just happens to be her summer camp arch enemy. So that's a little synopsis. So I think what we can do is we wanted to have just like a little book discussion for those of us that have read the Matza Ball. Hopefully, somebody needs to mute. We'll have a little discussion. So hopefully Dina, Aviva, and Rebecca and I are not the only ones who have read the Matza Ball. It's okay if you haven't read it. It was not required to participate. And the nice thing about romance novels is we don't have to worry about spoiling the ending because, hint, hint, you all know how it ends. Okay, happily ever after. So, you know, hopefully if you haven't read the book after our discussion, you will still want to read the book. So I'm gonna take the spotlight off of us so that we can just all have a big Zoom room conversation. Let me remove from Rebecca. Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm going to switch everyone to gallery view. Great. Okay, so let's start. What are the 2 big secrets that Rachel, our protagonist, is trying to have? And what did you think those 2 secrets had in common? Who wants to jump in? And you can just unmute yourselves. If you're more comfortable putting your comments in the chat, that's fine. Yeah, Sarah, go for it.
So the 2 were her illness, which was chronic fatigue syndrome, and the other was her almost obsession with Christmas. for me, the link between them was that if she revealed, she felt if she revealed either of them, that society, for different reasons, would judge her and be critical of her, and she might even be, people who she really loves would be really upset and angry with her. So it's the fear of of what other people think of her, basically.
That's great. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Anyone else have any other comments or insights? So the two secrets is she's keeping the secret of her illness in her professional life. She's keeping the secret of her illness. And then in her personal life, she's keeping the secret of her professional life. They don't know, her family and friends don't know they just think she's like a freelance writer. They don't know that she is this Christmas novelist writing under the name of Margot Cross. Best name ever, right, for a Christmas novelist. And she actually has this secret Christmas office that's just, I want to spend the day there. It sounds awesome. So those are her two secrets. And Sarah did a great analysis. Any other comments or insights about these two secrets and why she's hiding them, and kind of, I don't think it was an accident that Jean Meltzer had her keeping these two secrets at the same time. See any other thoughts? There was a quote actually from an interview with Jean that said, her secrecy and shame around Christmas is also her secrecy and shame around living with her disease. It's a layered metaphor on acceptance and authenticity, but also visibility. Because in the disease that she suffers from, she can hide the disease at times. I mean, it's very difficult to, but she can hide the disease at times. And especially working kind of like as a writer behind a computer, people don't see her. They only communicate with her, through email and the internet and Instagram and all those things. So she can hide her disease that way. And then, when she's playing the rabbi's daughter and leading Kiddush and reading Torah at shul, she can hide her career. So she can have kind of this visibility, invisibility. And then talking more, yeah.
I thought it was interesting that no one in her life knew both of her secrets, that the people who knew that she was the writer didn't know about the illness she was struggling with, and the people who knew about the illness didn't know about her writing life. And that meant that she couldn't be authentic with anyone, that she could never be her full self in front of anyone.
That is a great point, Yafa. Excellent. Wait, but does her BFF know both? Is she maybe the only person?
Yeah, I think Mickey.
Yeah, Mickey knows.
Mickey knows. That's the only, but you're right. But Yafa, that's like a really good point. I mean, so Mickey is like the only time that she can be her authentic self is when she's with her best friend. And I mean, that's got to be exhausting, right? Like to do that all the time. That's a great point, Yafa. Any other comments about the secrets? Yeah, Aviva.
Well, in the vein of keeping secrets, it's interesting that like Christmas is her secret, because Christmas is so in your face. And like, that's kind of what makes it like frustrating or awkward or whatever for Jews specifically, because like you can never get away from Christmas. At least when you live in the US. I'm not sure how it is like in Europe or other places, but like around here, like Christmas is there. Like Christmas is nobody's secret, except that it's hers, because like she actually, comes from a society where she's not supposed to care as much as she does. And so for her to have like her secret to be this enormous public thing is kind of interesting.
Yeah. But I think it's more that like, because as a Jew, her Jewish identity and growing up in one of the reviewers described it as an Orthodox background. I didn't read it as Orthodox. I read it as conservative.
Yeah, I think more like conservative.
But I was so thrilled, like, because when do we ever see, right? Like, I feel like in contemporary literature, Jews are either just, if you're Jewish in contemporary literature, you're Orthodox, or you're like bagel and brisket Jew, and that's it. Like, you're completely secular and it doesn't play a role in your life. So to see, and we'll have Jean will talk about this, I hope, but to see Rachel portrayed as like, a Shabbat observant, synagogue attending, kosher keeping, inside and outside the house, you know, Jewish young woman was so refreshing because it was so authentic. It was great.
Yeah, you don't see religious
I-
observance of any kind in romances. You really don't see any of that at all, Jewish or otherwise. So
Yeah, no, she goes to shul, they have Shabbat dinner. I mean, it's not just, oh, Judaism is part of her life, like on the 8 days of Hanukkah, the Passover Seder and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. It is part of her everyday life. And so then she feels like she can't admit that she has this like Christmas fetish and that she fell into this career as a Christmas novelist. Yeah, Sandy. Oh, you're on mute, Sandy.
Hi. The one thing that I found hard to believe was that she could have this beautiful apartment, yet keep this enormous Christmas room a secret from her parents, from her mother, with all the tchotchkes that were in it. To me, it was, like I sometimes pass people who have Christmas displays outside their house, and I wonder where do they store all that stuff. This seemed like that, but indoors. And I wondered how it would be possible to really keep this indoor, not the secret interest of hers in her head, but all the stuff that it appeared she described. It sounded to me overwhelmingly hard to hide.
Okay, well, wait, Sandy, do you read a lot of romance novels?
No, I don't.
Okay, so
no.
you do have to suspend disbelief in this
Yes.
genre, and you have to just kind of go with it and be like, yeah, it's a little over the top and a little far-fetched, and that really wouldn't happen. But if you're gonna, I encourage you to read more of this genre, and you just let it go. You just read, you just enjoy. It's just pleasure. It's book candy.
Yes, it was. It was all that.
Yeah.
But at the moment
She
when
doesn't
I
have to
got the,
store her stuff, because I think the Christmas office is year round. It's like permanent. But, and then, spoiler alert, like it turns out that she really wasn't keeping the secret. Like she thought that it was a secret, but the people closest to her did know.
that's true.
So
That's true.
that is true. But, and they knew obviously that she was very successful. Yeah, Dina.
So what I found very interesting in a sense is that her agent and her publisher knew she was Jewish, and this was totally a pseudonym. And that to me, I thought was very interesting. I mean, she doesn't go by Margot Cross, which again, a fantastic name. And I mean, she clearly has to be open about this because she's not doing in-person author events. She's not doing, in order to keep her life secret, she's clearly not doing anything outside as Margot other than her Christmas office. And that I thought it was very interesting, and the way that was sort of, everybody knows but nobody knows, but everybody, and she's able to keep this such a secret because she lived such a very small life in a way. She's she's living her, which I'm sure, I mean, as a romance reader, I want to experience lives that I'm not going to have. So, I want to experience what it's like to live, on some island somewhere, or not just on the Upper West Side, which I don't live on anymore, but it's, she's able to really, go to the small towns and be different, but some people know that.
Awesome. Wendy Marks. Oh, unmute. No, you have to unmute, Wendy.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Thank you, Rachel. I just started reading the book. I'm on page 25.
You'll be
Couple of
finished tonight. You'll finish at 2 a.m.
I know, a couple of things. I got to the page where it says, meanwhile, Rachel, she's discussing with Mickey. Mickey is, trying to coax her to come out. And she says, how's it going to be? My father's rabbi, blah, blah, blah. But what is me to read? She's a very successful author. And yet the author, describes her, Rachel, sick and disabled, unmarried and childless. I mean, she's a very successful woman. Her parents would deny her knowing that she's so successful. I mean, I know it's scary for her to come out to her parents. But here's a very, very accomplished woman. And yet she defines herself, or the author defines her, as sick and disabled, unmarried, and childless. You know what? These days, I don't know, again, I don't know much about the author, but you can be married, you can be unmarried and have a child.
Let me interrupt you though. Yeah, you got to keep reading.
Okay, all right.
That is how Rachel sees herself in the beginning of the book, but that's not how she sees herself at the end of the book.
Okay.
And
And here's something else that I want to say. I'm a Jewish educator. Sandy, Wasserman, Arlene, they know me. I teach Hebrew. I do bar mitzvah lessons. I officiate at the services. I happen to like Christmas. This is my first season that I'm not listening to Christmas music 24/7, but I enjoy it for the main reason that I can understand every lyric. Okay. It's not rap. I grew up with it, but these days I can really appreciate here on Long Island. I mean, I'm surrounded by Asians and Indians, but everybody accepts Diwali. Everybody accepts different religions. It's just not Christmas all the time. And sometimes I think I enjoy the Christmas music because it's like forbidden fruit. Or maybe
yeah, no, that's a good
Rachel,
point.
you know, it's something that she can't have. It's something that she wasn't allowed it. So that's her secret. Okay.
Yeah. But I think she goes beyond, she goes beyond just like, I mean, there's like a lot of us that love Christmas and love the lights and love all the things about Christmas, but she's going, I mean, she's making, and she's not, I mean, her readers, she's writing Christmas novels as Margot Cross. Her readers, I mean, we'll talk about the whole Own Voices thing. She's a little bit of a, you know, like her readers assume that she's celebrating that this is her holiday and this is who she is. So there is a lot of that, you know, the hiding and the visibility. Invisibility is definitely part of the theme. Let's go on. Oh, I see a hand up, Sandy, and then we'll want to talk about some of the romance.
Thank you. I'll just say, Wendy, keep reading the book and then look up the author, look at the back of the book. This is really the author's, it's a fiction, it's a romance fiction, but it's really about the author's life. So the part about the disability, there's so much in this book about that particular medical problem, medical issue, that it is so informative to the reader, besides the Christmas part.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Sandy. If you read about her on Facebook, you'll learn that too.
Well, we're going to meet the author. You'll hear all about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
So for those of us who do read in this genre, and it's okay, you can admit it. I mean, Dina, Rebecca, Aviva, and I all admitted it, and hopefully you still respect us as serious, you know, academic, public, and Judaic librarians. So those of us that read in this genre know, you know, that Jean Meltzer plays with all the kind of traditional holiday romance conventions and a lot of the romance tropes. If you read a lot of these books, there is a formula, and it's on purpose. Like there has to be a formula. It's like required for to be considered a romance novel. So what were some of the holiday like twists and tropes and the romance twists and tropes that Jean Meltzer incorporated in the Matza Ball that you loved and that you picked up on? Those of us that, Arlene.
Actually, I'm listening to it on Audible. I try to speed it up so fast so I could finish it before today, but I still have a little bit left. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It's so much fun. But it's also this comedy of errors where one person thinks you did this and you didn't do that. And it's all kinds of those tricks, like, you know, unforeseen consequences because one action was led to another, but actually it didn't, you know, so all of those confluences I thought were very clever. Like she didn't know until she finally talks to her friend that he was the one who alerted the camp. So that was a surprise to me, like, oh, because you were assuming Jacob all along, you know, was the one who engineered all of the bunk to see their first kiss. So it was all those conventions, you know, like, oops, you know, oh, I didn't realize that, you know, I thought those were very clever. And I think
the misunderstandings from past and present is the familiar romance novel trope. So that definitely is one. Leora put in the chat that she loved the tropes. The only one I didn't love was the gay and or Black best friend trope. And there was a reviewer, Leora, you're not alone. I did catch one review that did criticize, had a small criticism for that as well.
Also winning her back with the gown, all of those, I'll give you a gift, it's very, very kind of done before, but I guess I don't read a lot of romance, so I'm
No, this is all part of the genre. So what are some of the other ones? Did anyone pick up?
If we're talking in like straight up, like, this is how certain romance books are formulated. I think this is what you would call friends to enemies to lovers, that they started out as, camp friends, had a falling out, and they're, getting back together in the book. So that's like a very standard, how things are done. And some people love that and some people hate it. It's something that some people seek out and some people just, take it as it comes. But also they have the third act breakup, and then it's concluded with like the big grand gesture. So those are definitely regular occurrences in romance novels. And I think this was meant to be like kind of deliberately cheesy. Like I haven't read a lot of Christmas romances because, to be honest, they do get on my nerves. But like, but the whole like, magic of the season and like, and everything being kind of over the top and melodramatic and very kind of taken to extremes, I think is very much a Christmas romance thing. And like being like super duper heartwarming also, and like having like a magical granny person. Like I think this book kind of reads like it's a holiday movie, like a Hallmark movie, and I think that was deliberate. I think she did that on purpose.
Oh yeah, we'll ask her. Let's ask her that. For sure. Yeah, Aviva taught a lot of them. The friends, enemies, lovers, the second chance romance. That's another like subgenre of romance. The second chance romance, the one that got away. That's a familiar trope. The interfering but well-meaning family members and friends. That they're regular reoccurring characters in romance novels. But I thought it's interesting though how Jean Meltzer, she kind of does turn she puts in the concept of Bashert. And in romance novels, it's typically like what word is used, like soulmate, right? That it was the soulmate, love at first sight, whatever. But there was a great scene in the book with Jacob's best friend, who was an Orthodox Jew, right? If I'm remembering correctly. And they're having this dialogue, and the friend says, you know what Bashert is. It's like a soulmate. How very modern of you. Bashert literally means destiny. Isn't that the same thing? Not exactly. Soulmate, it's a movie concept. It's the idea that you fall in love with someone and off you go living happily ever after. But in Judaism, that's not the point of finding your Bashert. So what is the point? Your other half exists to make you better. She exists to complete something you lack and vice versa. You challenge each other like chavruta, two blades which sharpen each other. But that's different than love, Jacob. In some ways, it's more powerful because only your Bashert, your other half, can fill up what you lack and help you fulfill your destiny. And I mean, I'm sorry, any book that is like, that she used the word havruta in her book, like, and that is not the only example. Like Aviva just said, like, love the quote, it's so Jewish. I mean, that is just an example of how super Jewy this book is. And I was just like over the moon. I was so impressed. And, she drops words like havruta and all these other things like all the time throughout the book. It's not superficial. Like this is real, this is real Jewish content. So
to me, it felt that it was authentic. It wasn't just like some of the other Jewish Hanukkah romances I've read are kind of like, oh, let's just, it doesn't feel authentic. It's, they go to the coffee shop and have rugelach, and they go to and this is the way that they're observing Shabbat, and the way that the mother is saying, here's the timers, but I don't care if you use them, but, let me feed you. But, I got the sense that it was just so authentic. It wasn't a caricature, which felt really refreshing. And I see that in other Own Voices novels. There's a great romance novelist, Jackie Lau, who is Canadian and writes a lot of, she's Asian American, and her characters are all Asian American, or one of the members is, and they, you know, it's women in STEM. She comes from a STEM background, and it feels authentic. When they go out to eat Chinese food, it's, you know, the authenticity of this, that it was so refreshing to see that. Yeah.
And that's why I think, I mean, those of you that know me, I was lucky to get an advanced review copy of this book in the summer. And I was just blown away because I could not believe. And one of the things that Jean Meltzer says, and I see that she's here, so we'll let her in a minute. She explains that she wanted to see if she could write a story that would have all the holiday twists and tropes and magic that she personally loves, but still feel authentic to the contemporary Jewish experience. It was like her challenge to herself. Can I do all the things that make, you know, all the reasons why readers love romance novels and love holiday romance novels? Can I do that and make it an authentically Jewish novel? And I think, as Gina and I and others have explained, like, she totally achieves this, like A+ for doing this. And a lot of the reviews recognize that as well, which was great. Okay, so let's let Jean Meltzer in. It's a little before 1, but oh, she's here. Okay, so I'm gonna spotlight me, and I'm gonna spotlight, where'd Jean go? Let me find her. Or if someone here, she is. Hi, Jean.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
Hi, welcome to the Association of Jewish Libraries. We were just talking and gushing about the Matza Ball.
Oh,
So,
thank you. I'm
let
thrilled
me,
to be here.
great. Well, let me formally introduce you. I didn't give your bio yet, so let me formally introduce you to everyone. Okay, here we go. So Jean Meltzer received her BFA from New York University Tisch School of Arts, Department of Dramatic Writing in 2002. After graduation, she served as creative director of Tapestry International, an Oscar-winning television and film production company, where she oversaw the writing, development, and production of over 250 hours of children's television and won numerous awards for her work. In 2006, Jean moved to Israel to pursue a career in the rabbinate and studied at several colleges and seminaries for 5 years. She also became an outspoken advocate for the disease, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Tell me how to pronounce it, Jean.
Myalgic encephalomyelitis. It's a mouthful.
Myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, MECFS. In 2012, Jean ended her rabbinical studies and spent the next 2 years homebound due to this disease. She therefore has the unique distinction of being the world's only Emmy award-winning, chronically ill and disabled rabbinical school dropout. Today, Jean lives a thriving, chronically fabulous Jewish life in Virginia. Her first book, The Matza Ball, was published by Mira in September 2021. It's been featured on several most anticipated and best book lists. And the audio version, which Arlene already mentioned that she really enjoyed, was named one of the best audiobooks of 2021 by Apple Books. So welcome again, Jean. We're so glad that you're here. We were just, when you came in, we were talking about how much everyone appreciated the authentic Jewish content in this book. And, you know, this is a special audience here, you know, as the Association of Jewish Libraries. We read a lot of Jewish books, and we're not always impressed with the authenticity of the Jewish content. So why don't you start by telling us, like, how you came to write the book and, like, what the inspiration behind the plot of a chronically ill, nice Jewish girl leading a double life as a best-selling Christmas novelist.
So there were like a lot of events that sort of happened at the same time that sort of like sparked the idea. But I think there were like 2 primary things that had happened for me. The first was I was sort of growing up. I went to Tisch, as I mentioned, and when I was in Tisch, we were taught to identify what's called a high concept idea, which is an idea you can sell in a film in like 1 line. So boy goes to wizarding school. And they were very good at teaching us what a high concept idea was. But high concept ideas were not ideas that looked like me. They were not Jewish women. They were not chronically ill or disabled women. So as I got older and this sort of own voices push in publishing began to happen, I began to wonder how different my career would look like had I had more stories of positive Jewish role models growing up in film and television and in books. The other side of the coin was I was visiting my niece. She was 7 years old, sitting on my lap, and she looked up at me and she goes, "Aunt Jeannie, you have a big nose, and big noses are ugly." And I was like heartbroken because she goes to Jewish day school. She's surrounded by strong Jewish women. Never in my life or in my community have I bemoaned the size of my nose. I love the size of my nose. So these two events coincided that I realized I needed these stories growing up, that my career would have looked different. And realizing that my niece and future generations of Jewish young men and women needed these types of stories. And so at that moment, I was like, I am going to challenge myself to write a Jewish romance. And I felt very keenly that it had to be a Hanukkah romance. So that's like why I sat down to write a Jewish romance and a Hanukkah romance. And then of course there was more in terms of like the idea itself and sparking the idea.
Yeah, oh my God, that's great. So we also talked about like the two secrets that Rachel was keeping in the book. So there are these two major aspects of Rachel's identity, her Judaism and her illness. So what were you hoping that Rachel would teach readers about ME/CFS, which has been so rarely depicted in literature? And then what were you hoping she will teach readers about Judaism, which is often only superficially depicted in romance novels?
So I guess like the joke is, my background is edutainment with children's television. So I guess, and also being in rabbinical school, you can't quite take the girl out of edutainment or rabbinical school, it always follows you. So I think, I think depicting what chronic illness actually looks like. I think one of the biggest misunderstandings, not just with ME/CFS, but most chronic illness is the fluidity of our diseases. So one day we look fine, one day we're walking the dog, running a marathon, whatever, and the next day you're in bed. And that's very normal on the spectrum of chronic illness. So I think being able to show that to healthy people was super important, that Rachel looks normal, she functions normally, but she secretly sort of has these like bad days, and also the stigma that goes with a lot of these poorly understood sort of orphan diseases. In terms of Judaism, I was absolutely hoping to sort of bring down some of the barriers to entrance and to allow anyone to sort of walk in and see the beautiful Jewish world, those best Jewish moments that meant so much to me in my last 40 years of life. So Shabbat dinner and what it's like to be 20 people crammed into a room, and the fun of summer camp and just the warmth of a Jewish community. I heard someone compare the book to a comp of My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and the idea that you didn't need to be Greek in order to sort of understand and appreciate that film. We were all Greek, and that was sort of my hope with the Matza Ball, that it wouldn't matter who you were, that you would fall in love with the Jewish community.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting because the Publisher's Weekly Review said about the Matza Ball, this heartfelt rom-com should be unwrapped by people of all faiths this holiday season. So the book is obviously resonating with Jewish readers, but were you surprised that non-Jewish readers were picking it up and loving it? I read a quote to the group, where you dropped the word chavruta, with no definition whatsoever.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was, so that's only one example. There's probably 57 other examples of words like chavruta that you put into this book. Did you feel like you had to make any concessions in terms of the Jewish content to make sure that it would be accessible to all readers? I was curious if you got any pushback from your editors and your publisher.
No, I have to give it up to Mira. They really when they leaned in, So there was no pushback. They let me go full, strange usage, full hog. I went totally in, as Jewish as I wanted to be. And with the knowledge that there was a wide spectrum that would hopefully be reading the book, and that we would try to appeal to various, non-Jews, Jews with no background, educated Jews from adjacent, whatever. So yeah, there was no pushback, and it's resonated really well. Obviously, books are interesting. I had a very good rabbi friend say, not every book is for every reader, but I wrote a book that I would want to read, right? And I like walking away from a book, not just having fun, but feeling like I learned something. So if you're a reader who enjoys, a book that, even if you're not Jewish, but you can maybe walk away and learn something, then I think the Matza Ball is a perfect book for you.
Yeah, I agree. And let's talk too about this own voices issue, which, as librarians, most of us are familiar with, but in the literary world, the hashtag own voices movement has argued that stories about communities and cultures should only be written by people from those communities and cultures. The Matza Ball definitely qualifies as an own voices book, but then there's also backlash to this idea from those who say that it deprives writers of the power to invent, and it may cause, writers to be pigeonholed, like Eugene Meltzer can only write, books about Jewish disabled girls.
Right.
We obviously don't want that to happen. So, what are your feelings about this own voices movement as it pertains to Jews and Judaism, and as it pertains to depicting chronic illness and disability? And of course, we were talking about how Margot Cross, was, that Rachel was not an own voices author when she was, making her money as a Christmas novelist. So share your feelings with us about this topic.
So one of the things to know is I've been writing my whole life. And for me, I write as sort of, my writing is my therapy, right? And it came out of a place of feeling silence growing up. So for me, I would never, ever in 1,000 years tell anybody not to write the story that they feel they need to write, whether it's own voices or not. As a writer, I would never, ever tell someone to censor themselves. You have every right in the world to write a story that you want to write. But I will say that from this journey, from writing this sort of own voices book that is super Jewy, can someone write the Matza Ball who hadn't lived it, who hadn't lived in an observant world? I don't think it's quite possible, right? So yes, maybe if you did 20, 30 years of research, but I have to say there is something from doing own voices that my experience, my background, having been in school, having lived in the community, I think added something. So when we pick up books and we say, maybe there's a nice depth of flavor in an own voices story that maybe is only envisioned or fantasized about in a book that isn't. But that being said, I would never tell anyone not to. We should all write the stories we need to write.
Great. Well, and I think I've always said too, like it can be own voices, but it still has to be good, and it still has to be well researched, and it still has to be authentic. And what drives us crazy sometimes is when we'll see a book and we'll be like, this is so inaccurate and inauthentic and whatever, and it's like, well, but the author's Jewish.
Right.
Okay, well, but still
or
inaccurate
it's like
and
what do they
inauthentic.
call it, the paper dolls, and you just sort of like swap one in, but there's no real sense at any. I mean, I used to get frustrated that when I would pick up books that were labeled like Jewish, that like the most Jewish thing was the character would be eating an Israeli salad, like in the middle of the story. And I would be like, first off, we're Ashkenazi. My parents are like, have still never seen a salad on the table. But like for me, I needed more than that in order for it to feel like it connected to my experience. So yeah, I understand.
Well, you definitely achieved that. And I think that's why so many of us were so impressed and just over the moon and gaga about this book. Let me open it up to questions from the audience. So if you have a question for Jean, you can put it in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand. Arlene, go for it. I saw you first.
Hi, Jean. Lovely to meet you. I couldn't help but ruminate on your use of the names Rachel and Jacob, and then he has some epiphany and he wakes up the next day. I couldn't. So I assume that was intentional, and could you just talk a little bit about that?
There is so much. I guess my Jewish worldview is intense. And this is what I mean by like the own voices, because so much of what I did, I think it was completely subconscious. And it wasn't even until I got into revisions that I realized that like some of my metaphors I use are very Jewish metaphors. And it actually made me realize why I had so much trouble breaking into publishing earlier, because I was using metaphors that nobody understood. So for example, yes, Rachel and Jacob was absolutely purposeful. How could I not? That is like our great Jewish love story, right? So, I mean, totally wanted to draw on the idea and that they were bashert. But like, if you look at the book, everything from like her smashing her idols, right, which is very reminiscent of like Abraham and the idols in the beginning. She has all her idols and dolls.
Yeah.
Or like the first time Rachel changes, Jacob pushes her into the lake. Didn't do it subconsciously, but then I was like, wow, that is such a clear call out to like mikvah, right? So like all these little things that I absolutely like, it just stems from having this like Jewish worldview and or the use of Pharaoh, right? My editor was like, which Pharaoh? And I was like, for Jews, there's only one Pharaoh. We don't have, it's there's no name. There's only one Pharaoh. So, this idea very much came from like the Jewish worldview. But Rachel and Jacob was absolutely, how could I not, the most famous love story. I clearly know my Old Testament, my Old Testament Bible, my Torah very well. So,
what about Jean? You know what? That reminded me, Arlene. Great question. It was on purpose that you made Rachel and Jacob meet when they were 12, and then fast forwarded 18 years. Not 20 years, not 19 years. You want to talk about that element?
So it was so for me, again, I was thinking about like the readers and things like that. And I felt like halakhically, it would be much more problematic if they were over the age of 13. But then I love the idea of like 18 being sort of like this call out of like this very important number of like high and life. And also this idea, not only that they were bashert, but that Toby being a Holocaust survivor, and sort of this idea that like the two of them were bashert, were meant to be together, but would be continuing sort of the Jewish world and the Jewish life forward. So yeah, those numbers are all very specific, aside from the fact that keeping them 12 is very young, it's very innocent. Teenagers are more angsty and moody, and would there have been a prank war? There probably would have been more kissing. I didn't want to get into kissing. So, keeping them 12 was very important, but it was very important to me that be under the age of bar mitzvah, and that also that the 18 years sort of, and also this idea that they had to wait, to be with each other, that he had to wait for her. Which is very romantic.
Is that all, would that also continue with Jacob's relationship to his biblical father? Did that also play into that, I gather, as well?
Yes, absolutely. So when Jacob sort of wrestles right at the end with his father, that's absolutely a callback to the Bible and Jacob wrestling and then changing his name to Israel. And if you see one of the themes of the book, Rachel keeps saying names are important, right? And she's saying it about chronic fatigue syndrome. But Judaism has this long history where names are very important. So yes, absolutely. This is all, if you're Jewish or not Jewish and you pick this up, you are absolutely getting all the things I was trying to do. Absolutely.
Yeah, I almost want to read it again. I need to read it again and pick it up. I loved those of you that were on our session last Purim with Anna Solomon. She introduced us to the concept of Easter eggs, of hiding Easter eggs in books, which we got to come up with a better term for that. But that's exactly what Jean, what you've done. And there's these Easter eggs for those of us in the know.
Yeah.
If you're not in the know, you miss them, but you don't. But it's fine if you miss them, right? Like you still get the story. But those of us in the know are like, light bulb, like we know what she's doing here. Oh, Rebecca, Hanukkah, Afikomen. That's a good one, Rebecca. We'll have to call them Afikomen. Chaim had a question in the chat. He says, I'm just starting to read the book and enjoying it very much. May I ask, when you started writing the book, did your story evolve, or did you have the entire story are already outlined and ready to go?
Yes, I outline. I learned. Took me a very long time to learn that I have a very big imagination. If I don't have a clear outline, I will easily stray off path. So even before I sat down to write the book, there was a full outline, beginning, middle, end, and it didn't really stray too much from that skeleton. If anything, we just added more through revisions.
Great. Any other questions for Jean? Don't be shy. Can put them in the chat or ask it. Oh, I see a hand. Oh, Wendy.
Jean, being that you went to rabbinical school, once again, you didn't hear, I'm a Hebrew school teacher. And, when we talk about mitzvot and things that we find in the Torah, I just had this lesson yesterday with a young fellow about B'Tselem Elohim. again, I haven't read the book. I question, Rachel's relationship with her rabbinical dad, that they didn't, talk, Torah terms or whatever. I mean, but Tselem Elohim is a huge concept. We're all created in the image of God. Nobody is less than. And again, I have to read the book because I just feel sad that she feels, Rachel feels less than. That's all. Oh, the other thing is a camp romance at 12. You never forget your camp romance. I still remember mine. And again, you don't remember, when somebody dissed you at 12 either. So that's really a very important point in her life. I mean, I know, the gist of the story, but I can't wait to read more of the details. So maybe from your rabbinical point of view, Jean, maybe you could talk about that phrase, B'Tselem Elohim, or am I reading too much Jewishness into this?
No, you should absolutely. Torah has 70 faces, so every reading is valid, and wherever you come to it is valid. So I would say that Rachel definitely has her own issues. Jacob clearly has his own issues. I think it just speaks to how we are as human beings. We can have wonderful parents, great upbringing, and still hold on to sort of our own junk, our own baggage. I think for Rachel, she's sort of, stunted because of her chronic illness, because she feels all these sort of shoulds. And whether or not her family is involved in that feeling, she feels it. And as for Jacob and being 12, I think he's very stunted too. He has a trauma that happened very badly to him as a young man. And he, the only way either of them can kind of get over this stunting is sort of together, right? That they're going to be each other's better halves and push each other to better. But in terms of that concept of B'Tselem Elohim, that everybody is sort of made in the image of God and that everybody has a purpose, I clearly believe that, right? I clearly believe that every person, just as much as I believe in this concept of the shared, I'm a very spiritual person. So I think, that it was a huge point of this book, that even if Rachel, I think Mickey says it at one point, you be the person the universe asked you to be, right? And that means if the universe asks you to be disabled, or the universe asks you to be Jewish, or whatever it's going to ask you to be, you be that person. That we all have that sacred mission, that we're here for a reason. So that's absolutely something I believe in, and hopefully comes through at the end of the book.
Great. Sandy, and then I see there's another question in the chat. Go for it, Sandy.
It isn't exactly a question, but because you're talking about speaking in authentic voices, as I was reading the book, which I love, thank you, it's just really such a unique and just fun, wonderful book. I was thinking, because I had been reading on a children's writer's blog about whether or not it's okay to write in another voice. And as I was reading this book, I was thinking, can you imagine if this was in reverse? I mean, because as Jews were in such a small percentage of the world's population, can you imagine if there was a Christian woman who wanted to have a Hanukkah collection or a Jewish collection of things? It wouldn't be ridiculous, but it would be so unique that I think you'd really have to suspend any sense. It just goes to show how much we as Jews are influenced by the culture around us.
Yes.
Because I don't think the other could even work. We are so influenced by music and shtick and everything that we don't even realize how much we've internalized it, because I think the other wouldn't work. I don't know if it would work. Maybe it would really have to be stretched to make it work, but that would be quite funny.
No, you're totally right. I mean, I don't think it could work, but it definitely speaks to, sort of that we've acculturated very much to our American society, which I think is one of the tensions in the book too, that, sort of exploring what it means to live, in the words of Kaplan, what it means to live between two civilizations. So, and nowadays we live between more than two civilizations. So we live between multiple civilizations. So absolutely, I don't think it could go the other way. I think it would be very hard to believe. I mean, maybe.
So there's, I see 2 questions in the chat I want to get to, and then Dina and Aviva, I'm sure, have awesome questions. first question is, Cindy asked, Cindy says, the book seems written for the screen. Did you write it with that in mind, and has it been optioned for a film?
So we're all very hopeful for a film. But in terms of, I was trained as a screenwriter. So you're always going to see within my books a very strong visual element. In fact, I had to actually learn to put two characters at a table talking, because that is considered a sin in screenwriting. So it is very, very hard for me sometimes to just have like straight dialogue or to get the like questions out, because I'm very much a visual thinker and writer. So yes, I mean, you're always going to see that it kind of, my books feel like a screenplay, because.
Okay, well, you will have to keep us posted on if it, we need to be the first to know if it's going to be a film.
I promise.
And anyone who is lucky enough to have, I think it was only in the paperback, but there is a little teaser for your next book, The Perfect Jewish Husband. So do you want to talk a little bit about that and like what you're working on next?
Sure. My second book is called Mr. Perfect on Paper. And I don't know how much people are familiar with it, but basically it's about a third generation shachanit or matchmaker who finds her list for the perfect Jewish husband sort of shared on national television by her bubby. And of course it goes viral, a nationwide hunt ensues. But as sort of this search for Mr. Perfect on Paper progresses, she finds her heart drawn more and more to Christopher Steadfast, the totally charming, not Jewish reporter following her story. And for me, I felt like for all the reasons, it was really important that Matza Ball be a Jewish romance between two Jews. I really felt it was important to sort of do an interfaith romance for my second book, but really an interfaith romance where the relationship, what it's like when your heart is sort of torn between your love of faith, your love of your community, and another person. So, and that was partly inspired by my own love story. I was a rabbinical student, first year of rabbinical school, deeply committed to my Judaism and faith, like always, when I fell in love with a non-Jewish man who eventually became my husband. So and I joke, it's about, on the surface, it's an interfaith romance, but really it's about how man plants and God laughs. So, which has been the story of my life, completely. Man plants and God laughs. So yeah, I'm very excited for that one. And then after that, we're just gonna keep writing all sorts of Jewish romances, at least until there's more, Jewish romances on the shelf. I think I'm just gonna keep doing them, because I want them in the world for my nieces, my nephews, for everybody. So until more people start joining in.
Yes, we want them. Yes. There is demand. Dina, and then Aviva. And and then the publication date for Perfect Husband on Paper is August 2022, right?
Yes, August 9th, I believe.
Awesome.
So, Jean, I want to thank you for this book. It was wonderful. I, as a Jewish girl from Long Island, who must have gone to the same day school as Rachel did. I feel like I've seen her on the Long Island Railroad platform. And I also live in Northern Virginia, so I'm fairly certain we probably passed each other in the Wegmans aisle. But I'm just curious about choosing to write in the romance genre. I mean, romance is finally like, people are realizing that it's not such a terrible genre. I mean, it keeps the publishing industry alive. It's something like $1 billion a year industry, but it still has these like, you want to hide the books, you don't want to tell people you write romance. And I'm just curious if you ever thought about writing in a different genre, or if there, what sort of led you to, was it your love of romance, or, so I'm just curious.
So it's a really simple story. I mean, I didn't actually pick up a romance book until my late 30s. And it was, I think like a lot of Jewish people, I sort of had a misconception about it or an idea, but I was coming out of a period of my life where I'd been very ill, I'd been homebound, and I was sort of very focused on my healing. And the way I focused on my healing was I cut out anything negative or toxic. So no Facebook, no news, no, and in terms of like fixing my brain, I wanted to read, but I wanted it to be joyful. I didn't want anything dark. I really wanted something light and easy. And I sort of came across romance, and romance sort of became really important to my sort of individual healing journey of like being joyous and staying in a positive place. And, you know, even if it was a bad day, feeling fabulous inside because I knew my worth, right? And so when I sat down to write, when I started to write again after being so sick, I didn't want to do dark YA. I didn't want to do a thriller. I didn't want to do anything dark. I wanted to write something really joyous and stay in that joyous place, especially because I wrote the Matza Ball during the pandemic. So it was even doubly important that I stay in a positive place. And then aside from that, I think about the positivity in the romance. I think that also for me, I get very interested in writing a story when it challenges me in some way. And the fact that I didn't have like this plethora of like joyous Jewish romances to like look to as how did other authors do it was fun for me. It was like, it was challenging to have to come up with something different. And so I was really excited for me just to do that. So it was two aspects. It was the joyousness factor and wanting to stay healthy and just my positive self. And then the other side was just, you know, I forgot what I was saying, brain fog, but yeah.
No, you're right. I think it's exactly, I totally get it. I mean, as someone, I know Dina and Aviva and Rebecca read way more romance than I do. And I use it as that break, you know, serving on the AJL fictional work committee, now the Sophie Brody committee. I can't just read romance, but it's like my reward. It's like, okay, read 3 Holocaust books, and then you can read your romance novel, take a break, you know, from the world, or, you know, they're great for plane rides and long times in the airports, you know, when we were doing those things. I mean, you know, beach reads, however you want to qualify, but I think that's awesome. Aviva.
So especially considering you're a screenwriter as well as a book author, I think this, I was curious, like how deliberately were you trying to follow the conventions of like a Christmas romance novel or like a Hallmark movie? Because those are really a thing. Like there are people who read and watch almost exclusively Christmas books and movies because like there's so many of them, and they follow a formula that people find really satisfying. So I was, and this to me, I mean, kind of felt like the Jewish equivalent of that. And I'm curious how deliberately you or consciously you were following those kind of conventions when you were writing it.
Really deliberately. Like I wanted you to feel like you were watching a Hallmark film almost, it was very deliberate that like I was using tropes and conventions, but just trying to make it feel as authentically Jewish as possible. Again, it was that challenge of like, can it be done, right? Can we have the old wise mentor figure? Can we have the, you know, the cookie scene with the chocolate on the, you know, there's always that scene in a Christmas movie. And I was very inspired by the work of like Debbie May Comer, Karen Shaler of like Christmas Camp and things like that. Also, if it feels similar, it's because all those Hallmark films follow what we call the 3-act structure. So, you know, in a screenplay. So I follow a 3-act structure. So, you know, the midpoint reversal and the climax and the dark point before the end and the A and B subplot coming together at the end. So it seems, you know, and the funny things about those Hallmark films is they seem so simple and on the beat, but that is incredibly hard writing. That is, you know, as Mark Twain, I think once said, easy reading is damn hard writing, but that is really hard to be able to do that in a 3-act structure as simply as Hallmark does it. I mean, they clearly have a format down, but it is hard writing.
There's a couple more questions in the chat and we're running out of time, but have you encountered any negative reviews of the book or negative comments in the Jewish community? I didn't find any in my research. Did you get, you know, any nasty internet trollers or anything like that?
I knew when they were kind of branding me as the Jewish romance writer and putting a big Jewish star on my book that like, you know, I stayed off Twitter, you know what I mean? So I knew that there would be a backlash or that, you know, there would be, I joked I had a 1-star even before the book was like finished on Goodreads. So I don't really read the reviews. I get lovely emails, like just like with my life with chronic illness, I focus on the positive. And it has been 99.9% positive. And I'm actually amazed the Jewish world has so embraced the Matza Ball. And I wasn't really sure how people would react to a Jewish romance or a Jewish Hanukkah romance, but it's been in general, just everyone has been so kind and wonderful and very supportive. So I'm beyond touched. I had no.
And I think really, I mean, the Matza Ball, it like I said, I didn't find a single negative review. And then from the Jewish press, you know, from the Jewish Book Council, and of course here AJL, but there's a review on aish.com. I mean, aish.com reviewed the Matza Ball. So I mean, I think, you know, pretty remarkable that that you really, you know, you covered the wide breadth of the Jewish experience. Do you know if it's going to be translated? Sarah's specifically asking if it's going to be published in Hebrew in Israel.
Yes, it will. Yes. So Hebrew rights have been bought and it will be out in 2022 in Israel, which is very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Any other languages? Just
yes, Swedish and German, and obviously just UK, Australia, all those places. So anywhere English speaking in the world is covered, and also Germany, Sweden, and Israel. I think
okay. And then, you know, we're out of time, but just like one last question, Arlene, and this is a great maybe, because could kind of talk about how this translates to other languages, but I guess I assumed it was common knowledge, but maybe it's not. The concept of the Matza Ball as an actual Hanukkah party, I guess not everybody knows that's a thing.
Yeah.
So you want to explain the title and the event?
Sure, yeah. So the Matza Ball, again, I'm speaking to sort of the authenticity. There's no such thing as like latke making competitions. There's no such thing as like a Hanukkah town. But the Matza Ball is a real event, and it's usually held, it started 50, 60 years ago. It's usually held on Christmas Eve. It's a giant Jewish singles event, and it was a way for you to sort of party with other Jewish singles while all your friends were off celebrating Christmas. And over the years, the Matza Ball has sort of been like changed. Synagogues do it now. It has different names like Lakapalooza, or there'll be like specialty events. But the Matza Ball itself is a real event. Yeah, matzaball.org, and and lots of them all over and various iterations. So if you're looking for something to do on Christmas Eve, go to your local nearest city metropolitan and find you a Matza Ball.
So is the title, when it's translated into Hebrew, Amalia is asking, is the title in Hebrew? What's the title in Hebrew?
I don't know. You know, I think they will have the right, I guess, probably to change the channel or change the title if they want. I haven't spoken with anyone yet who's in charge of translating, so I guess they'll figure it out. I'm not sure what it will be in Hebrew.
Okay, well, we can't, you have to promise to tell us as soon as it is available in Hebrew. You need to let us know, and as soon as it's optioned for a film, you need to let us know. Thank you so much, Jean, and you're welcome. We have one more little part of the program, and you are welcome to exit, but Dina and Aviva and Rebecca are going to just give a little, they are our romance reader enthusiasts, and they are gonna, if you are looking for, if you've now read the Matza Ball, and several people in the chat said that they have never read a romance book before, so Jean has broadened their horizons. So now if you're like, okay, I'm in, you've got us hooked, what should we be reading next? So Dina and Aviva and Rebecca are gonna tell us what to read next after we've read the Matza Ball.
Who's going first?
Why don't you go, Rebecca?
I go. Okay, so a couple of titles that I really loved, and I think we're gonna share a document with you guys about some ideas that we've
I'm gonna
come
paste
up
the
with.
Google Doc right into the chat right now. Anybody should be able to view it if you click on the link.
So I've definitely read a bunch of YA ones, especially as Sydney Taylor Chair. One of my absolute favorites is Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel and Solomon. It's about two high school rivals who in one night before their graduation are playing a school-wide game, and it's a real great enemies to lovers story. That, you know, they've always been academic rivals, and having to team up with each other to win the game, they discover that maybe they don't really hate each other as much as they thought. It's got Shabbat dinner, it's got an extra love of romance books, it's got great friends, like, it's delightful. So I'm gonna start with that one, and maybe we'll go around. Dina, you want to go next?
Okay, so my favorite, probably the first one the first Jewish romance that I ever really read, is let me just make sure I'm giving everybody exactly the right information here. So it is a holiday one, but it's actually not Hanukkah. It's called Matza Ball Surprise by Laura Brown. And Laura's written several romance novels with Jewish characters. So in Matza Ball Surprise, you have the romance shtick that it's playing with is the fake relationship. We have Gabby Feinberg, who just wants to get through this Pesach Seder with her family without them playing matchmaker and really getting on her case about why she does or does not have anybody in her, a special someone in her life. And so she decides to just pick up a hot guy at the gym who turns out to not just be hot and single, but also to be Jewish. And he's also deaf, which is fun. I actually like reading about, there's a diversity angle there that's really interesting. Because he's deaf, they can't communicate the normal way. He doesn't have a hearing aid. He can't read her lips easily. So it's the way that they communicate through the book, and it actually makes things adds a lot of tension, makes things a little more interesting. So she brings this guy home to her family, and they have to navigate this fake relationship, acting like they've been in it for a while, and really they don't know each other at all. And in the end, he also needs her help getting out of his own relationship situation, and how things turn out it gets pretty rocky until they get to their happily ever after. So that was fun for the Jewish part, and also it was fun because I thought the communicating between a hearing and a deaf person was authentic. Laura Brown is either hard of hearing or deaf herself, but that just added a lot of dramatic tension. It was just something that I would have been curious about, like how to make that kind of thing work. So that was particularly entertaining to me.
Yeah. I also really enjoyed the Matza Ball Surprise. I think I bought it on Amazon thinking, oh, I'm gonna hate this, but it was very sweet. And so somebody had actually chatted, this is not quite a romance novel. My recommendation is going to be The Intimacy Experiment. That is a real romance novel. It's the second in a series. And if you read romance, you know that there's always series that, it's a great, publishers are very smart. And authors are really smart to, give you, I guess we should call them the afikomen's within the book, so that you can follow all the friends who get their happily ever afters. It is about a young rabbi, Ethan. I think it's on there. Ethan, who is, at this little shul that's kind of sailing. They need to bring a new life, and he meets up with Naomi. Is it Naomi, right? I should have been more prepared, apparently. It's on the link. Naomi, that she is a former porn star who works in a startup, which is described in the first book, a very sex positive startup and of the series. And I thought it was actually really interesting in how they grapple with Judaism, and some of the synagogue politics sounded very true to life. The synagogue president who doesn't like anything and all the synagogue members. And I just thought it was a very sweet story. And in terms of grappling, because Naomi grew up in an interfaith family, and she says, well, I'm not really Jewish. And, Ethan says, well, what makes you not Jewish? I thought it was very kind of nice to see all different, that again, there's not one type of Jew and there's not one type of person. So yeah.
So another title I'm gonna highlight is I Kissed a Girl by Janette Alexander. This is an LGBTQ romance between a makeup artist and a star on a movie, like B-list horror movie. And the thing that they're not sure, and the star doesn't want to come out right away, and there's that whole tension. But the thing that was really delightful is once they both realize that they're Jewish, at one point they share Shavuot. They have cheesecake together, and to see Shavuot in any book ever was like blew my mind. And it's just a really sweet story, and there's some mystery drama in it. Definitely one worth picking up. Aviva, you want to go next?
Yeah, should I do one more? Okay. So I think I said in my introduction to myself that I like sports romances. And so I'm going to mention Imaginary Lines by Alison Parr to you, because it stars a Jewish girl and a Jewish guy. He's an NFL player. He's an NFL star, and she is a sports writer for a major media outlet. They knew each other since they were kids. Of course, she was obsessed with him because it's a romance and that's how it has to be. She was obsessed with him, but he thought she was too young and whatever. And then she's kind of thrown back in his sphere professionally, just as she decided that she's ready to get over him. And he suddenly realizes that he's actually very into her. And so I like sports in general. I thought it was fun to read a sports romance with Jewish stars because we're kind of underrepresented in I mean, definitely not in sports romances, but like to have a Jewish hero be somebody who's physically, physically strong, big, attractive. Like I think a lot of time people have these assumptions about Jews being very different than that, about, that we're maybe, I don't know, we're money makers or whatever it is, but like, you don't really see a lot of Jews, especially ones who are, remotely observant and in that kind of field. And so I thought that was really fun and different to read. And I would love to see more of it. Especially there's a few observant Jewish boys who got into Major League Baseball training lately. That would be really fun to see that come out in a romance at some point too. Becca, Dina, is there anything that you would like to see if that hasn't been written yet or you haven't found yet in the world of Jewish romance?
No, so I'm right now reading a compilation that I found in the library, 8 Kisses for Hanukkah. Again, I saw it and I was just like, ugh. It's several short stories, which I tend to not like because it, like, I don't know, it's like you can't, it goes too quickly from one story to the other. It's like just as I, find somebody, but the first one, which I thought was a Highlander Hanukkah, and I tend to not like, which is, again, you talk about romance tropes, and it's all about, and she puts it in a historical context, which this is, 19th century Scotland, and the Jews are coming back to the United Kingdom, but they're not really allowed to be citizens yet. So, and in Scotland, they're apparently more welcoming of Jews than they are in London. It's a lot ridiculous, but it was kind of like this, it's like it gets that kind of traditional Highland romance, which is like such a subgenre that I don't follow very much, but it was interesting. And what was nice about the compilation is that it's not just, two people who are in their 20s and they want to get married. There was a story about an older couple. I think I haven't finished it yet, but I think one of the later stories is also about a married couple, which was kind of, again, kind of interesting to see lots of other things. But I would love to read more historical Jewish romances. I don't read a lot of historical romance because I find it kind of blah, but the history is it's usually really well researched.
Yeah, I think mostly I just want to see more representation. I find it that I until I was an adult, I never really thought about, I want to see people who look like me on the page. I always felt like, reading is for seeing other people. And the more I see it, the more I want to see more. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Orthodox, and so I think actually it'd be really interesting to see somebody work out how to make that, authentic and whatever in a romance. There's definitely ways that you could work around that kind of thing, like for people who, wouldn't touch each other at all before marriage. So I would love to see somebody make that work.
I think that's great of you, because it's like Jean Meltzer said, she answered the challenge of like using all the holiday romance tropes, but with authentic Jewish content. So now that she's achieved that, I think someone needs to like up the ante and see if they can do it in the Orthodox world. I'm sure it can be done if the right person tackles it. So, well, thank you all so much. So Rebecca and Aviva and Dina's Google Doc is in the chat, but it is, as Aviva said, it is not exhaustive. So if you have other books to add to that list, please let us know, or, let them know, and we will, kind of keep a running list. There's been some lists that have been floating around online recently too that you can access. So thank you all so much for coming to this program. I want to, of course, we thank Jean Meltzer. Please somebody asked in the chat about being hesitant to buy the book for their synagogue library. Yes, 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 yes. You do want to have this book. Like, no, you should have no reservations whatsoever about adding this book to your synagogue library, to your JCC library, and it of course should be in your public library as well. And I think you want to own a copy. Ellen put in the chat that she loved it so much she gave it to her daughter. This is a book, buy yourself a copy, read it, you'll devour it in less than 2 days, and then I'm sure you have at least 12 friends that you will want to pass it on to. So it will be a worthwhile
I'm going to
purchase.
interrupt and say it's not, it's what's called a closed door romance. So it's definitely appropriate for high schoolers. Like, give it to middle school kids. If there's nothing, let them see a relationship that is really wonderful.
There is.
You can give it to your mom too that way.
You can give it to your mom. Yes, you can give it to your mom and your daughter. I will say, I always cringe a little bit with that. Yes, it is a closed door. There's nothing, it's PG-13. There is drugs and alcohol.
That's true. That's yes.
So, and I just think I don't know. I say, I don't think you need it in the high school library. Rebecca and Aviva can tell you all the awesome YA romance novels that belong in the high school library. Let's not grow up too fast. Give the teens the YA romance novels, and then, this is for everyone else. But it is definitely PG-13. So yes, you can
leave
give it
it
to your
around
mom.
the house. That's what I would.
Yeah, you can have it around the house. You can give it to your mom. You can give it to your bubby. I think by the comments in the chat, then we span, an age range. Everyone's really loving it. So we thank Jean Meltzer for giving us this Hanukkah present. I want to thank, Dina and Aviva and Rebecca for doing this with me. We thank Jerry for being our Zoom host. And we do thank all of you for joining us. Sorry, we went over a little bit, but happy last day of Hanukkah. And hope we can all be together soon. Take care.